So, welcome back to another episode. Today we are going to be discussing or talking about or translating, whatever, the tree of the Lärche, or just the Lärche in general, which is in German die Lärche. So, let's just dive right into this episode. As always, I'm going to translate the words word by word, or the text word by word, then the sentence and the sentence structure of like the English translations and the sentence structure of German, and then the sentence in the context. So let's start. Here we have the, like with the content-wise introduction first of all. Here we have the Lärche, which is going to appear in the text, the only tree, like in German we call them needle trees, Nadelbäume, which are changing the color of their needles during winter. Like usually they don't change the color of their needles. They are so-called in English evergreens, or in German, what's it called? I think you just call them needle trees, so Nadelbäume again. But they don't change the color of their needles, I think, but they do. And in general they grow, as far as Wikipedia is telling me, generally more on the northern sphere of the earth, the globe, whatever. And nördliche Urwälder, which means northern, what's it called? Northern original forest, basically. Urwald, or jungle, you could say. So, northern jungle of middle, or I think you call it kind of middle and eastern Siberia, like the so-called helle taiga, light taiga, or taiga is a zone in Siberia, where trees this is very natural, and I don't know too much about it. I've just heard about it. Let me just taiga. What? Is there a second TA? Borealer Nadelwald. So it's Alaska, Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia. So it appears to be some global wood forest kind of thing, but I think it's very popular for its nature, and usually looks like this with a lot of conifers. And in general, another fact which Wikipedia told me is that the European Lärche, so I think the most common in Germany, was the Baum des Jahres 2012, which means Tree of the Year 2012 in Germany, and also the Tree of the Year 2002 in Austria. So that was, I think, for the content-wise introduction. Maybe I'm gonna just pull up a picture again. Here, I think this is very common for the Lärche. They have these small cones with these smaller types of, what's it called? I don't know what to call it in German, Zapfen, I don't know, Stängel, something like that, like kind of cone stalks or something. But yeah, very typical, these smaller cones. Then they also have, I think, typically smaller needles, and they change the color in the winter, so that should make them kind of stand out, at least for a needle tree. And I think their woods, from what I read a few minutes ago, was that they have the so-called hardest woods in Europe, which is in terms of needle trees, to work with it, kind of, how do I say this, the biggest density or highest density of woods in terms of needle trees to work with it, which makes them very very good to work with. And so I think we're just gonna start. translating and going through this article section of the Lärche. Das Nadelkleid der Lärche verfärbt sich als einziges unter den Nadelbäumen im Herbst gelb und fällt im Winter zu Boden. So, this is the neutral form. Nadelkleid, Nadel we had before. Of course, I'm always kind of confusing the two accents. This is why I just said Nadel. But yeah, Nadel, of course. Nadel. Needle. Kleid in general means dress, so it's basically needle dress, but this is just a very figurative way of saying the... what's it called? I'm just gonna say Nadelkleid. I don't know how to call it in English. Nadelkleid. Needle... It's really called needle dress? I don't know, but like the... basically owning of the needles, the hanging down of the needles, like just the needles being there basically, kind of. Or the existence. Der Lärche of the Lärche, verfärbt. This derives from the word Farbe. And how this is coming together is because when you, in the present form, conjugate it, it becomes this S färbt, for example. It dies. Ich färbe, also in the I form, I think in all forms. Ich färbe, du färbst, er, sie, es färbt. Wir färben, yeah, it's always this way. But it derives from the word Farbe, which means dye or color. Yeah. Then verfärbt, by the way, means to either kind of become a wrong color, but in general it just means to become a different color. Fair, we also had that in some previous episodes, I think, so plural form probably. But I think one episode I remember I kind of explained it very thoroughly, but I think it was also in more than one. This is why I said plural. But yeah, verfärbt. So fair, we had that is always kind of saying that something is not necessarily going in the right direction, like kind of going off mainstream, you could say. But in this case, it's also saying that it's going off mainstream but not necessarily going in the wrong direction. So verfärbt means just that it's not staying the same, or that it's, yeah, verfärbt just means it's becoming a different color. But it could also mean in terms of, like, I mean, this is not really used, but like, how do I say this? I can't think of a good example. Meine Hose hat sich während des Waschens verfärbt. Something like that. Which is kind of like accidental. My pants changed color during washing. So verfärbt in this case really means kind of to have gone off what you wanted, of the path that was set for it, but it hasn't gone the right way. But this is just saying, yeah, it's not the same, it just changed. But you could also say, technically, das Nadelkleid der Lärche färbt sich als einziges unter den Nadelbäumen im Herbst gelb und fällt im Winter zu Boden. But the problem here is färbt is more like active, so verfärbt is more fitting in this circumstance, you could say. So, a long time spent of this word. Let's move on. Sich, itself, or it's the same. Ich, mich, du, dich, wir, uns. Yeah, so sich is es sich, er sich, sie sich, so the third singular form. Als, as, einziges, only one, single one, but in this case rather only one. Neutral form. Unter den Nadelbäumen, under the needle trees, you could say, so conifers, and this just means among the needle trees. Im Herbst, in dem, im is always in dem, and im Herbst, so in autumn, in fall, I think, autumn and fall should be the same, right? Herbst. autumn or fall, yeah. And gelb, which means yellow, and fällt, falls. This derives from the word fallen. Es fällt, ich falle, du fällst, sie, es fällt, wir fallen, ihr fallt, sie fallen. And these forms are like kind of, we call them in German bent or something, I believe, which just means that the vowel changes, but I'm not quite sure if this is quite the right way to say this, like gebeugt, but gebeugt, I think this may be something else, but I'm just saying that the vowel changes sometimes in German. I don't think that it's in most cases, but in some cases it's just that way. Like we had that, where was it? Verfärbt. We had that as färben, but this is as it's already färben. It also doesn't change, of course. So yeah. Und fällt, the rest from fallen, fall. Im Winter, in the winter, or in winter time. Zu Boden, to ground. You might wonder why it's not zu dem or zum Boden, but zu Boden, this could also be correct. You could also say fällt zum Boden, but zu Boden is kind of a phrase, because zum Boden, even though it's maybe technically more correct, because you would have to say to what and with an article like in front of it. But in this case, it is kind of a phrase, zu Boden, to the ground. It is just something you have got to get used to, so don't wonder if you see something like that. It is just a phrase. So, das Nadelkleid der Lärche verfärbt sich als einziges unter den Nadelbäumen im Herbst gelb und fällt im Winter zu Boden. So the needle dress, I believe, of the larch dies, or what's it called, rather maybe loses colour, you would rather say in English, I guess, itself, als einziges, as only, unter den Nadelbäumen, needle trees, in the autumn, yellow, and falls in the winter to ground. So the needle tree of the larch is the only one that loses colour in the autumn, and falls to the ground in the winter time. So, here's the main article, die Lärche, the larch. We're gonna read that as one at first. Die europäische Lärche ist der einzige europäische Nadelbaum, der im Winter seine Nadeln verliert. Man findet sie eigentlich im Gebirge, da die Lärche aber schnell wächst und ihr Holz als Bau- und Möbelholz sehr geschätzt wird, kommt sie in Deutschland auch in vielen Wirtschaftswäldern vor. Unter den Nadelbäumen hat sie das härteste und schwerste Holz. Als anspruchsvolle Lichtbaumart muss der Lärche zum Wachsen regelmäßig Platz geschaffen werden. Sie würde sonst natürlicherweise von anderen schattenverträglichen Baumarten verdrängt werden. Auf feuchten bis mäßig feuchten, gut durchlüfteten Böden fühlt sie sich wohl. So, die europäische Lärche, the European larch, this is what I wasn't I saying that before like that? This is what I was saying before, the tree of the year of Germany 2012 and of Austria 2002, that this was the tree of the year. Die europäische Lärche, the European larch, ist der einzige europäische Nadelbaum, der im Winter seine Nadeln verliert. So, the European larch is the only European needle tree or conifer, der im Winter seine Nadeln verliert. That, or in this case, he who, basically, so because this is the male form, but we're gonna just say that. But keep in mind that this in German, this makes a difference if you say der, die, or das, because this is, of course, it just makes a difference. In English, it's always the or that, or rather that in this case. In the winter, his or its, but rather his, translated word by word, but it's in this case because in English it's a thing. Nadeln, needles, verliert. Yeah, this is of course from the word verlieren, and it's the third form singular, third person singular, basically. So it loses its needles. So the European larch is the only European needle tree that loses its needles in winter. Die europäische Lärche ist der einzige europäische Nadelbaum, der im Winter seine Nadeln verliert. Man findet sie eigentlich im Gebirge, da die Lärche aber schnell wächst und ihr Holz als Baum- und Möbelholz sehr geschätzt wird, kommt sie in Deutschland auch in vielen Wirtschaftswäldern vor. This is basically kind of the same as one in English, like when you say one, in this case finds, it's, what's it called, eigentlich, originally or something, actually, really, in reality, Eigentlich is such a word that is, I believe, not really able to be translated into English. I mean, you can translate it and kind of get it in the certain circumstances where you use it, but eigentlich is kind of, it says in like originally from the intention of it, basically. But yeah, I was explaining this man. Man is basically the same as one, or yeah, I think so. Because you use man, this is not really a form that is like listed in the ich, du, er, sie, es, wir, ihr, sie list, because this is of course not a real person, but this is just speaking for the general public, basically. Or speaking for the, do you say rhetoric, I don't know, form of kind of, I don't know, kind of existence or something, like man findet sie, one finds them, basically, even though I think it's kind of used differently in English when you say one does that and that, and in German you say man tut das und das. That's kind of maybe different, because, for example, in German you also have this man sollte, I don't know, dies und das, dies, of course, with an E in between there, nicht machen, even though dies und das is of course just a placeholder. But yeah, in English you would rather say you shouldn't do this or that, but you could also say one shouldn't do this or that. But this is basically just what I'm trying to say, that man is, I think, more commonly used in German than in English when you kind of want to express something general, kind of. I hope that makes sense. So, man, basically one, findet. Man, I think, if I'm not completely mistaken, let me just think about examples. Man findet, man sollte. I think it's always derived from the third person singular, so sie, es person. So when I have man findet, it's basically the same as sie, es findet. So, one finds she or her, basically. Sie, eigentlich, not to be confused with the plural form. No. Actually, is this plural? No, this is singular form. But you could say this could also be plural, because man findet sie, you don't know if you're talking about plural or singular form, so keep in mind this can have different meanings, but in this case as die Lärche and not die Lärchen, which is the plural form. Lärchen, die. As this is not there, I think they mean the singular form. So one finds her, eigentlich. So this is what I was explaining earlier. This just means, you could say actually, really. I'm going to translate it again. Actually, really. I think it has kind of different meanings in different circumstances. Because this is rather translating to actual, really, real, true, in reality. It's kind of more like wirklich, something like that, I guess, which rather means really. But in general, I think eigentlich rather translates to in its originality, because then you mostly say something like eigentlich, aber, something like that. Like, for example, here we have an aber, and this is just, you say something in its like original form, or originality. Is this even a word? Originality. Yeah, should be. Originalität, also a very, what do I say, advanced German word, kind of. So, man findet sie eigentlich im Gebirge, so generally, you could say generally you find them in the mountains, Gebirge, im Gebirge, in the mountains. We had that also, I think, in previous episodes. There's, of course, the rest from the word Berg, which means mountain. Gebirge means basically a mountain, what was it called? Ridge or something? Mountain range. I always say ridge somehow. So a mountain range, or a kind of, you could say, chain of mountains or something. Even though a chain of mountains would be called Bergkette. So this is called a mountain range or mountain chain, apparently. So, man findet sie eigentlich im Gebirge, so generally, or in the original form, you could say you find them in the mountains, or one finds them in the mountains. Da die Lärche aber schnell wächst und ihr Holz als Bau- und Möbelholz sehr geschätzt wird. By the way, there is a comma because of this da, which is a subordinate clause. So I'm not going to get too deep into the sentence structure because I'm not such an expert on it, but I'm just saying that this is a conjunction where there's always a comma before that, because this is a subordinate clause, like, for example, also the words aber, or weil, or denn, which are very common words. Sometimes even before und, but this is very rare. Or also rarely before oder. Or are there other words? I'm trying to think of something. Das. Also in front of words like der, die, das, if they refer to something that stands before the comma, like der Hund, or also den, by the way, den also, like der Hund, den ich mag. But yeah, we're not gonna go too deep into the comma sentence structure, some kind of thing. If you want to look up, just look up the word Nebensätze, or in English, of course, subordinate clauses, and then German. So, da die Lärche aber schnell wächst, da just means because or as, die Lärche, the large, aber, but, schnell wächst. This is also you have to be kind of aware of this. This is different. In English, you would never, I think, say but in the middle of a sentence. But in German, you can say that. Da die Lärche aber schnell wächst. So kind of you can switch it up. Like, instead of this aber being here, or with a white space and then there, it's starting here, so it's kind of having the same function but in a different sentence structure, kind of. I hope you get what I mean. Da die Lärche aber schnell wächst, as the large but fast grows. We also had that in some previous episode where it said also wachsen can have different meanings. It can have meanings with to grow, which is the most common. It can also have meanings with to wax something, I think. Like wax your legs or something to get rid of the hair follicles or hair, whatever. And da sie aber schnell wächst, and wächst, here we have again this A with two dots on top, which is a, what I said earlier, kind of, I think it's called bent form or something, gebeugte, but I'm not quite sure. I'm just saying that the vowel changes here. Ich wachse, and this is also, I think, where du wächst, sie es wächst, and then wachsen, sie wachsen, ihr wächst, it's the same vowel, but just for du and er, sie, es, so you and he, she, it changes. And aber schnell wächst, as the large but fast grows. You could also say as the large does grow fast. So kind of like you could compare this aber with a does. So kind of it really does something. Which also, I think, does also kind of implies a but in English, basically. Aber schnell, fast grows. In this case, could also mean to walk something, but in this case, of course, grows. Und ihr Holz, her wood or its wood in English, als Bau- und Möbelholz, as Bau. In general, it can mean a dam of or building of beavers or something. Let me just Biberbau. Appears to be also a company, like this kind of thing. I think, didn't I also show it in some previous episode? I think. It's been a bit longer since I've recorded one, so I don't recall everything I did in the last episodes, but I think I also showed, I also showed this picture if I remember it correctly. I'm just saying that a bowel can also be this, or it's kind of maybe rather a dam. But also, yeah, I definitely have that open where I also showed a picture of a dam. And yeah. But in general, Biberburg, it's also apparently called Biberburg. Beaver Lodge. And yeah. Bau, so this is just for the word Bau, or it can also just mean a building. Like, for example, ein Bau. For example, how to say this? Ein Bau im Neuzustand. Like a building in new condition, you could say. Not necessarily a building you might think of in English, where building just means really some literally building, like some house. But ein Bau in German is, I think, more something like raw, not necessarily finished, but it can also, I think, in terms of what's it called, Immobilien property can also mean real estate, something just in terms of buildings generally speaking. So Bau, this also means building in terms of the verb, so to build something, and this is what this is referring to, a building or to build. And Möbelholz, Möbel means furniture, if I'm not mistaken. Furniture. And so it refers to a building, or to build basically, and furniture wood, so just to build furniture. Sehr geschätzt wird, very valued or appreciated is, or is being. Wird, geschätzt wird. So here we also have this passive form, werden. The passive, I think, if I'm not completely mistaken, is always, what's it called? Constructed. It's always, in German we say gebildet. Or formed with the, what's it called? Help. In German we say Hilfsverb. Auxiliary verb. Let me just plug in my laptop. As usually. So with the auxiliary verb of werden, which means to become. I mean, it can also kind of, like, I'm not quite sure, but I think werden, and I think in some previous episode I said it's the future form of sein. Because you say, ich werde, but this is rather maybe to become, but the future form of sein is maybe rather, ich werde sein, and there you also have this werde, or werden. Anyways, but werden in general means to become, so geschätzt werden, could also mean to become valued or appreciated, but in general, in this case, it means to be appreciated, so passive form. And geschätzt, we also had that in the previous or some previous episode where I also explained that it comes from the word Schatz, which means treasure. And I think then I went down that path with, like, what's it called? With the affirmative words or something like honey, babe, and all these kind of things that they use in German. But not this, like the German words like Hase, Mausi or something, I don't know. Und ihr Holz als Bau- und Möbelholz sehr geschätzt wird, kommt sie in Deutschland auch in vielen Wirtschaftswäldern vor. Comes she or it in English in Deutschland, in Germany, auch also in vielen, in a lot of, many. Daraus from the word viel. Much also. Wirtschaftswäldern vor. So, Wirtschaft derives from the word Wirt, which means a host or landlords, but in general it's rather host in terms of, for example, restaurants, but also like used in terms of Landwirt, which is rather agricultural topic, on the agricultural topic, so a farmer. But Wirtschaft means, Schaft basically is the same kind of as ship in English, friendship, hardships, something like that. And Wirtschaft means economy. Wirtschaftswälder should be like, this is also what I was explaining, I think, in the second or so episode. There is a difference in German between Forst and Wald. In English, I think it's kind of not the same, but you have it with woods and forests, where forest is, I think, more used, and woods, or woods is, of course, woods in general is, of course, something else than a forest, but woods is, I don't necessarily know what the difference is. I'm just gonna Google it. Woods versus forest. Meaning or Bedeutung. Forest. This AI kind of thing is a bit annoying. So forest means a big, thick forest, basically, and often a very, very characteristic or very, how do I say this? You could also say large ecosystem. Woods is a smaller, less thick, or less, what's it called? Dense forest, or piece of forest, you could say, like wood, like forest area. And yeah, forest is more formal, woods is more colloquial, you could say. And yeah, I think here we were, yeah. So it's very, very valued, and Wirtschaftswäldern, yeah, here we were. So in vielen Wirtschaftswäldern, I think this is what I was saying, like, let me just compare the two. Wald versus Forst. Annoying. Bedeutung. Yeah, this is what I was saying. A forest is a more economically used area to get wood, and I think it's also more what's it called, artificial in comparison to just Wald, which is, in general, it should be more natural. And I think Wald is usually used like 90% of the time, versus Forst, which is, I think, probably only used on, what's it called, Tafeln, info panels, Infotafeln, information boards in the forest, or in terms of anything that has to do with buying forest, or with money in terms of forest. So, und kommt sie in Deutschland auch in vielen Wirtschaftswäldern vor? Comes it in Germany, or she, also in many forests, or woods, kommt vor. This derives from the word vorkommen, which means to appear or to happen. In this case, rather to appear, but it can also mean rather to happen. For example, es kommt vor, dass ich zu spät komme. This might also be weird, es kommt vor, but this just means it happens, basically, that I am late, or sometimes I am late. Es kommt vor, I think it's kind of similar to es gibt, where nothing is really giving, es gibt, it gives, nothing is really giving whatever is being given, but this is just a word to express, this is just German, basically. And where were we? Yeah, the whole sentence. So, man findet sie eigentlich im Gebirge, da die Lärche aber schnell wächst und ihr Holz als Bau- und Möbelholz sehr geschätzt wird, kommt sie in Deutschland auch in vielen Wirtschaftswäldern vor. So, one finds one finds her originally, or in its originality, I'm just gonna say that way, in the mountains as the large but fast grows, and its wood or her wood as building and or carpenter, you could say, and furniture wood very valued as being, comes she in Germany also in many economic forests up, you could say. You could also compare that kommt vor to come up, but rather in terms of appear to be there. So one finds them in its originality, I'm going to say that, in the mountains, but as the larch is growing very fast and its wood is very much being valued by the, I'm just going to say by the carpentry industry, or to build something, it appears also a lot of times in German economic forests, so in the forest. Unter den Nadelbäumen hat sie das härteste und schwerste Holz. Among the needle trees, Bäume, of course the plural of trees, Baum, Bäume. Here we also have this like from A to where it's changing its original vowel sound. Hat sie das härteste und schwerste Holz? Has she the hardest, härteste, härteste, also a vowel change. Und schwerste, das härteste, das schwerste, so neutral form, Holz, das Holz. So the hardest and the what's it called? Schwerste, very heavy, the heaviest wood. Holz is wood. This is also what I was referring to earlier, woods and wood. Woods is Holz in German. Woods can be forest. I think it can also be like the smaller kind of, what's it called? Like bush or something. Bushes. No, the bushes. Bush. Busche. Bushes, yeah. So unter in general it means under, among. So among the needle trees has she the hardest and heaviest wood. Among the needle trees it has the hardest and heaviest wood. This is also what I was referring to earlier. That's what I read. Well, I think I read it on Wikipedia. Sorry if I accidentally bumped against the microphone. But that's, it has the heaviest wood in terms of the conifers or needle trees, you could say. And this is why it's being very much valued, because it's more durable, more kind of flexible. Of course, it makes it maybe a bit harder to work with, because, if you work with wood can be in terms of its density. If you have, for example, beech, it can be a bit harder to saw through in terms of, like, for the blade of the saw, in comparison to, for example, a light conifer like, what was it called? Fichte? Like spruce. I mean, of course, it depends on the, like, how many times I'm gonna say like in this video, I know. But it depends on the width, the size of the wood, of course, that you are sawing, but in general, like, how many times I'm gonna say like, I have to stop. But it's like, oh my god, I can't stop, sorry. But these needle trees, these conifers, they tend to be lighter in size, whereas trees like the olive tree, I think, is very hard, or cherry is very hard to saw, but this is just what I'm trying to say, that these harder woods are of course more durable, whereas woods like conifers are being more used for not so durable tasks, like, for example, building a, what's it called, gerüst, or scaffolding, or framework. Like, how many times am I gonna say like, I have to stop? Building a framework or a fence, something like that in the garden, in comparison to building a whole table. You could also build a whole table out of conifer wood, but in general you would probably rather choose something harder, something maybe more durable. Not to say that conifer wood is not durable, but I'm just saying in general it's more like to choose harder wood for that. And yeah, that was my kind of wood knowledge about trees. Anyways, let's move on. Als anspruchsvolle Lichtbaumart muss der Lärche zum Wachsen regelmäßig Platz geschaffen werden. As anspruchsvolle, Anspruch, we also had that in some previous episode. This derives from the word sprechen, which means to speak. Ansprechen, talk to someone, or also to appeal to use, I think. Yeah, appeal to. And but anspruchsvoll, this derives from the word rather than, tracing or going down to Anspruch, the noun, with an, of course, capital A. So this is either a claim, but it can also be in its literal form to like a someone talking to someone, basically, something like that. And but this is, you could say claimful, because voll of course means full, or a lot of, but in general full. And anspruchsvoll in this case means basically a lot of claims, but anspruchsvoll means rather sophisticated. Anspruchsvoller is feminine form, or demanding. Sophisticated, yeah, here. Advanced, highbrow, challenging, discriminating, fastidious, exacting. I don't know why discriminating is here, but maybe I'm just not understanding the meaning of it in this case. And als anspruchsvoller, so as a demanding Lichtbaumart, or yeah, as demanding Licht means light. Licht, Baum, tree, art, type, in this case species. Muss, must, oder has to. Der Lärche. Why is there der? Because it's giving to, so I think it's the, what's it called, the dative case. Der Lärche, dem Baum, dem Blatt, so dative case. Die Lärche, der Lärche. Also I think it's the same for genitive. So, von der Lärche, no, this is von wem. Like, for example, das Blatt der Lärche, even though it doesn't have, like, leaves. So, das Blatt der Lärche. And here it's the same. It basically becomes masculine, but it's not masculine, it's just another case. So, as a demanding light tree species, I believe. So I think it grows really in the light demanding tree species, really in the more lightful areas of the woods or of a forest, the forest. Has or must the large to grow, zum Wachsen. Could also be, again, could be wachsen, could be waxing, but in general it means grow, so to grow or for the growing, zum Wachsen, zu dem Wachsen, to the growing, for the growing. Zum in this case means for the, but in general it rather means like towards something. Regelmäßig, this probably derives from the words, first of all, Regel, which means rule, then derives from the word Maß, which means a measure, so the noun of it, and Regelmaß is basically kind of a rule or regularity, I guess, and regelmäßig is rather in terms of time, and this means from time to time or regularly. Platz geschaffen werden. So place, Platz means place, geschaffen means to be, in this case because it's passive, muss werden. So has to be geschaffen, created basically, or in this case, Platz schaffen. Make space, yeah, has to be made space. And muss Platz geschaffen werden, so regularly place made is being, you could say, or will be, as it can also refer to the future. But as a demanding light tree species, or light demanding tree species, must the large, or for the large rather in this case, in English you would say, for the growing or to grow, regularly place made be to be. So basically, as a demanding light tree species, for the large there has to always, or has regularly to be made space for, you could say, even though that is a very kind of challenging sentence, you could say. And yeah, that was this sentence. Als anspruchsvolle Lichtbaumart muss der Lärche zum Wachsen regelmäßig Platz geschaffen werden. So if you want to look more into this kind of, what's it called? I would say advanced sentence structure, muss geschaffen werden. I mean, it's not necessarily advanced, but, or geschaffen werden, I don't know. Then Google it. Honestly not the best at explaining sentence structures and grammar things, so please rather look it up or ask an AI to give you a more detailed explanation if you don't get what you're looking for online generally. But yeah. Sie würde sonst natürlicherweise von anderen schattenverträglichen Baumarten verdrängt werden. She would, sie würde. This derives from the word, I think, werden, and this is the conjunctive form, werden, and this is, basically it's the same as would, you know, would, but of course not the would, but the would. But, where was I? She would, so, sie würde, I think it derives from werden, and this is the conjunctive form. Würde, or maybe rather würden, I don't know, but this is the plural form. Sie würden, sie, es, and I think it's also like können. This is kind of different. I think this is a special kind of construction because when I think of other verbs, like machen, I don't think there are forms like these except for this. Könnte is, of course, it's in English like would, should, could, or would have, should have, could have. And in German it's hätte, könnte, würde. Hätte maybe is kind of the same or similar with haben. Hätte, sie, es hätte. Ja, sie, es, sie hätten. Something like that. But would have, should have, could have, würde, hätte, könnte, wollte, but this derives from wollen. But this doesn't change the vowel inside, so maybe this is a different kind of thing with wollte, but this is also the same as the past form, so would have wanted is the same as wanted. Yeah, but I'm just saying that würde is special, I think. Like maybe with hätte, but in terms of conjunctive form. If you have questions, just Google it. So as always, you're free to seek yourself an explanation if you don't understand anything or something. Sie würde, she would, it would. Sonst, also kind of same as ansonsten. So didn't we also have that somewhere else? I don't know, but sonst, like this, if you somewhere see this, like with ansonsten, sonst, in some form, it's always referring to some other possibility or some other way of going, basically. So she would or it would otherwise, basically. Natürlicherweise, which means natürlich means natural, there's some word Natur. Natürlich can either mean of course or naturally, which it means in this case. Natürlicherweise, Weise is kind of referring to in a way, basically, because we have this Art und Weise, which is I think I also explained this on previous episode of this series, I believe, where we had also Art und Weise, or Weise, I think, which is, Art und Weise is kind of always together. I don't know why it's a phrase, but, and why we have that to say that like twice, because Art und Weise is not the same, but it's kind of the same in most cases. So it's kind of like type and way in the English, something. And so natürlicherweise, so natural way, naturally way, you could say, so in a natural way, natürlicherweise, or naturally maybe. Von anderen, of other, or by others, because it's a, like the others are the, how do I say this, are the things that are doing it, basically. Von anderen schattenverträglichen Baumarten verdrängt werden. So the other, we're going to get into that, tree species are doing something. Von anderen, of other, schattenverträglichen, Schatten means shadow. Schatten, shadow. Verträglich derives from the word, like, it originally derives from the word tragen, which means carry. Vertragen means to tolerate, to take, endure, bear. And schattenverträglich, or verträglich, is, for example, used in compatible, but for example, mostly I think in terms of digestion. For example, ich habe eine Unverträglichkeit. I have an intolerance. So schattenverträglich means shadow tolerant, basically. And this is the von anderen, so it should be accusative. Accusative von anderen schattenverträglichen Baumarten, plural form. Von wem, no, not wem, no, this is not accusative, sorry, that is dative. Von wem den Baumarten, so by whom basically. So dative case, von anderen schattenverträglichen Baumarten, von wem. Tree species, verdrängt, this derives from the word drang, which means urge. Drängen, which also means to urge someone. And verdrängen, which means to urge someone out, I think. Or force someone out or push away. Yeah. And verdrängt werden. So are being pushed out. We also have here this passive form, verdrängt werden, which is always kind of looking like this. I think in general, sie werden verdrängt. This is I know this is kind of a different sentence. I was just thinking about why this is, because I think in normal like main sentences it's always like sie wird verdrängt, but this is because würde is here, it's kind of a different sentence structure, and because this is kind of, I think, like in this sentence structure acting kind of as one verb, even though it's not one of course, but kind of. And sie wird verdrängt, and in a subordinate clause, da sie verdrängt wird, and then comma, blah blah blah. And yeah, this was this sentence. Sie würde, she would, it would, otherwise, naturally, by others, other shadow tolerant tree species, being pushed away being basically, or pushed out being. So otherwise it would naturally be pushed out by other shadow tolerant tree species. Auf feuchten bis mäßig feuchten, gut durchlüfteten Böden fühlt sie sich wohl. Auf feuchten, on moist, I think, or also wet, but wet is, I think, like more water, so moist I'm gonna say. So on moist, bis in general means until, but in this case moist up to, basically in this case. Mäßig, which means we have that also regelmäßig, but mäßig can also mean, kind of funnily enough, moderate, so like in a normal measure basically. So on moist, until or up until moderately moist, in English you have to put a "ly" on at the end of it. Moderately moist, mäßig feuchten, gut durchlüfteten Böden, gut durchlüftet, plural form, durchlüfteten Böden. Auf wem, also here we have this this data form, auf wem, auf feuchten bis mäßig feuchten, gut durchlüfteten Böden. So on moist up until, or how do I say this? Feucht bis mäßig feucht. Yeah, humid to moderately humid, or moist to moderately moist, you could say. Gut durchlüfteten Böden, well aired, how do I say that? Durchlüftet. Ventilated, you could say, so that there is air coming in. So durch means through. Lüftet, this derives from the word Luft, which means air. And lüften, rather in this case maybe from lüften, which is kind of the verb of it, which means to ventilate or to open a window basically. I don't know if ventilate means the same, but it just basically means to let air in, open a window generally. Like for example, when you say lüfte hier doch mal, then you just mean open the window. Lüfte hier doch mal. Open a window. And not on your computer. So, on moist to humidly moist, to moderately moist, well ventilated Böden. This is the plural form of Boden. We also have a vowel change with the 2 dots on top. Floor, like floors, Böden. Soils, floors, yeah. Fühlt sie sich wohl? Fühlt sie sich wohl? Fühlt, there is not a vowel change because there's derived from the word fühlen, which already has these 2 points on top, so a U basically. An U, I don't know. Fühlt, feels she, herself, or itself well. Wohl in general means good or well, but it can also mean, in terms of like colloquial language, das ist ja wohl eine Frechheit, for example, when people are kind of angry. Das ist ja, is it written this way? I think so. Or eine absolute, very classic sentence basically. That's absolutely outrageous, or that's, yeah, wohl, sorry for the H, that was too much. So, das, that, is, jawohl, which is kind of really, definitely, this is kind of what it means. It's kind of, is there another? No, there's no. So this is, jawohl, it's like really definitely, this is such a, this is just kind of saying absolutely 100%, or I do find this to be also a absolute, definite or absolute Frechheit, which means, frech means, how do I say that in English? Frech. Cheeky, outrageous, naughty, yeah. So basically what this means, this might sound very kind of, for Americans, it might sound very British, but I think from an outsider it sounds very kind of advanced, but you would say this, I do find this to be an absolute naughtiness, basically, because Frechheit general means outrageous, but in this case, Frechheit rather means, impudence, cheekiness, insolence, effrontery, nerve, naughtiness. Yeah, rather naughtiness, so that's what I was saying. Frech means naughty, I think. Heid is kind of like ness, like ins, uri, or turi, or whatever. Like these kind of endings, or ship, or yeah, what I was kind of referring to in either previous videos or also this video with ship, or like shaft here. But yeah, Frechheit, so naughtiness basically. And wohl, in this case it means feels good, feels well, but in general it can also have different meanings, like for example the word doch, but we're not gonna go too deep into this word right now, so yeah. That was it for today. I hope you liked this video. I hope you learned something from it. If you have comments, always write in. If you have questions, always write it in the comments. I'm always there to help. And leave a like, leave a comment if you want to. Any other thing that you might want to say. And subscribe if you want to. And see you in the next video. Bye!